Okay, we're continuing our understanding of hypothesis tests, so let's keep going. We're going to hold off on actually doing hypothesis tests until the next section. So let's just see, on this page, they've already done the hypothesis test for us, which is nice. Here we go. Assume a significance level of alpha equals 0.05 and use the given information to complete the parts. So an alpha of 0.05 means that there's only a 5% chance that we got our results from our survey simply by chance. So it's really unlikely, it's 95% that the answer would not be true, that we would reject the null hypothesis if we had a value that was far enough away. So here we go. The original claim is that more than 45% of adults would erase all of their personal information online if they could. Okay? This hypothesis test, when you did the survey, resulted in a p-value of 0.0198. Okay, so you can see that our p-value is definitely smaller than alpha. Okay, our p-value is smaller than alpha, so that means we can eliminate D because the p-value, this says the p-value is greater, and we can also eliminate B. So that means we're narrowed down to A or C. So which one is it? Do we reject or do we fail to reject when the p-value is smaller than alpha? Do you remember? That's okay if you forgot. The answer is that we reject. We reject the null hypothesis when the p-value is less than or equal to alpha. This is so important that if you look on my cheat sheet and flip to the second page, which is all about hypothesis tests, look what I have up here in the very top corner. For all of these tests, all of these are hypothesis tests. Test statistic greater than critical value implies p-value less than alpha, reject the null hypothesis. Over here, test statistic smaller than critical value implies p-value greater than alpha, fail to reject the null hypothesis. So when you're taking the test or when you're doing your homework and you forget, it's right here for you. Although it would be very helpful if you could memorize these two statements. But both of these two statements apply to all of the hypothesis tests on this page. Okay, let's answer the next question. Without using technical terms, state a final conclusion that addresses the original claim. What is the correct conclusion? Well, the correct conclusion is our p-value was smaller than alpha, which means we reject the original claim. More than 45% of adults would erase their personal information. That's not true. It's not true that more than 45% would. So when we look at these, the percentage of adults that would erase all their personal information online if they could is more than 45%. That's not the best way of phrasing it. There is not sufficient evidence to support the claim. No, if we rejected the null hypothesis, then that means we did find sufficient evidence, at least for something. So both of these two are gone. I really like answer choice C. There is sufficient evidence to support the claim that the percentage of adults that would erase all of their personal information online, if they could, is more than 45%. This one is the correct answer. Look at D. The percentage of adults that would erase all their personal information online, if they could, is less than or equal to. That one's not true either. So we rejected the null hypothesis. That means we found sufficient evidence. If we had failed to reject the null hypothesis, then that means we did not have sufficient evidence to reject the null hypothesis. Let's do one more. Question 2 says, assume a significance level of 0.1. That means alpha is 0.1 or 10%. Here's the claim. The mean pulse rate of a certain group of adult males is 70. The hypothesis test resulted in a p-value of 0.0757. Okay, what do we think? I'll let you think about it. Do we reject or do we fail to reject? Alpha was 0.1, p-value was 0.0757. Got an answer? The answer is we reject. Just like the one before, if the p-value is smaller than alpha, that means we reject. We reject the null hypothesis because the p-value is less than or equal to alpha. Let's answer the next question on the next page, and then we'll wrap up this video. What's the final conclusion of the original claim? So the original claim was that the average pulse rate of a group was 70. That's now been thrown out the window. However, we don't really know if it's greater than or less than. We didn't state that in here anywhere. So what we know now is that we know that it's not equal to 70, but we don't really know if it's greater than or less than. So when you look at these answers, the first one, the mean pulse rate is not 70. That's true, we think, but it's not the best way of saying it. There is not sufficient evidence. That's gone immediately because we did find sufficient evidence. The mean pulse rate of the group is 70. That's not true either. Even if we failed to reject, we couldn't say that it's equal to 70 because we're not proving anything with this. We're just rejecting things with this. The last one says there is sufficient evidence to reject the claim that the pulse rate is 70. That is correct. So we're playing with words a little bit, but this would be the correct way to do this. Okay, so that concludes section 8.1. Now that we've kind of thought about the big picture of a hypothesis test, in the next section we will actually start conducting our first hypothesis tests, and I will see you there.